Hey, I'm Johnny Ashley. We're in the Hood in the Woods, and today we're going to talk about who is Johnny Ashley and what or where is the Hood in the Woods. Before we even start the video, I just want to make this real clear. I'm not trying to down the area that I live in, and what I'm really specifically trying to say is that people from all over the country can most likely make videos like this. From the West Virginia coal fields to the steel mills of Pennsylvania and Ohio, even up to sawmill towns up in the Pacific Northwest, and I believe maybe even fishing communities in the Atlantic Northeast. So, this is something that's happening all over the country. I'm a military kid. I grew up on military bases until I was 17. When I was 17, we moved to a town in between Denver, Colorado, and Cheyenne, Wyoming. When I lived in that town, I saw the Kodak film factory in Windsor, Colorado shut down. I saw the effect that had on the community. My dad's family is from southern Indiana. They live around the Evansville area. I have seen what the closing of the Whirlpool plant in Evansville, Indiana did to Evansville. Hood in the Woods isn't a place, it's an environment. And we're going to talk about some symptoms that a Hood in the Woods area might have. One of the symptoms of the Hood in the Woods that I can't really talk about, we don't have in our local area here, is just bad housing. So I'm going to knock that one out right now. When I say unlivable housing, what I'm talking about is an area that's become so run down that even though you might have people that would be qualifying for Section 8 housing or assisted housing, there isn't anything available that meets the standards that the federal government sets for people to live in it. Those towns I've been to where you can tell where the Section 8 housing is, the apartment complexes and stuff, because they're usually the nicest place around. They're usually the newest place around. While the rest of the towns run down, these apartments have been built in the past, 15 to 20 years. There's a difference between a company town and a factory town, but it's a real thin line. A company town might have been owned by the company, and after the company leaves, then it depends, what goes on with the land. But with a factory town, they've already got a town. The factory, builds, comes. Everyone in the town depends on the factory for a living, and then when the factory closes, what are the people in the town going to do? Oh, this is the foundry in Radford, Virginia, and it's shut down. This was the main employer of the town, but when it shut down, that left a whole lot of people out of work. This was a good factory to work at. They paid you a decent wage. You got more hours than you wanted. A friend of mine worked here for 6 months, and he quit. He lived for 9 months off the money that he had saved up working here. When this factory closed, that left a lot of people in this town, in the surrounding area, they was out of a good, a decent paying job. So then there's a trickle down effect. The landlords can't get the rent paid. Right behind me is the Radford city limits. Well, what Radford is it's a town inside Montgomery County, but they are their own county. Because of the foundry closing, they've lost so much tax revenue that they've had to double their property taxes to be able to maintain their budget and still be their own county. And if they hadn't have done that, they would have had to give up being their own town and reverted back to Montgomery County. This is Lane Stadium. It is in Blacksburg, Virginia, which is in Montgomery County, Virginia. Now, like Radford, Radford's an independent county inside Montgomery County, Blacksburg wants to also become an independent town inside Montgomery County. But what that means is all the money that comes into Blacksburg from the university, because Blacksburg is just a college town for Virginia Tech, that money is going to stop going to Montgomery County. The town of Pulaski, first kind of like a boom town, it started with the Altoona mine, and that was the major employer. That's what brought people to the area. And then later on, here Pulaski Furniture was the biggest employer. So the blue building was originally RCA factory for Sears, but then Pulaski Furniture took it over, this big blue building, and in fact all of this that you're going to see over here too, it takes up about 2 city blocks, with the blue building being one of the city blocks. If you looked at an aerial view of Pulaski, you know, you'd see that, you know, the whole town is built like right around this. This is like the center of the town, and everything radiates from it. So then with this, you know, shut down, you know, it really stalled a lot of the economic growth. But, you know, luckily, fortunately, the building is currently in use, but it is being used as a warehouse, and there's you know, a lot of shipping and semi-trucks. We used to have a lot of furniture factories in this region just because of the availability of the lumber. You know, cut the trees here, turn the trees into furniture here, and then you can send them out, you know, to wherever the market is. But, you know, as things started coming from China and everyone started getting just that cheap, you know, pressed wood, pulp type furniture wood stuff, you know, buildings like this, factories like this, you know, began to go out of business. This was killed by Amazon. It was also one of the main employers in the county. This is the Fort Chiswell Outlet Mall. The last shop closed in 2012. It's on the intersection of Interstate 81 and Interstate 77. People used to come from 3 states easily to come here shopping. The last store closed in 2012. This wasn't really a downturn of the economy, but more the change of the economy. We're in Christiansburg, Virginia. This is C&S stores, and then later CMI doors. Now what happened here was it was owned by a local guy, and he sold it, and then the other company that bought it, they ended up shutting it down because they had factories in other locations. They just more wanted to get rid of the competition. You would go to the hiring agencies and they really pressure you into taking these lower paying jobs, even, you know, if you didn't want to work there or anything, they'd really, you know, pressure you into it. And then you get stuck at one of these jobs like here that would only really top out at maybe $10 to $12 an hour. So you really you can't come up any more than that, and so you get stuck and people just accept it. And then you end up in a situation where people would work at, you know, a job like this for, you know, 10, 15 years, you know, not getting any retirement, not getting any, you know, benefits at all really, you know, and no chance of advancement. So that's the acceptance part of it. The second half of it is going to be going through the hiring agencies, because even if you want to advance, the hiring agency who's under contract with these people, they don't care about you. They got you placed. They got a body in the slot. They're making money. They don't care. They have high turnover here. They can keep someone here. They want to keep them here. So when a higher paying job comes up, the same company that put you here, they will not offer that job to you. They'll look for new recruits to come in and try to send them there. So you end up getting trapped in a job like this. If you notice, I'm standing right here in the middle of the train tracks. I don't have to worry about any train coming because now the foundry is closed. You know, the railroad guys don't need to come here. And that's like the trickle-down effect of, you know, some of these places closing is, you know, like the guys who move it, for instance. Now they're no longer needed. The big city around here is Roanoke, Virginia, and it's only like a couple 100,000 people. But it's not a coal town, it's a railroad town that depends on coal. It depends on industries like this. So when these industries close up, Roanoke is getting, you know, the downsizing effect of it as well, because Norfolk and Southern's laying off people. Norfolk and Southern now has moved their offices from Roanoke, and they've moved them back to the East Coast because there's been so much decline. Another symptom of being in the hood in the woods is, you know, the trickle-down effect from you don't have, you know, the industry that's paying everybody good. Now you don't have the people who's going out and spending their money on entertainment or, you know, whatever it might be. So you end up with, you know, these good buildings, but they end up shut down. Does your town have an abandoned factory like this? Does your town's former main employer look like this behind me? No, this is the company store in Austinville, Virginia. Now, the company store was where miners would work for company script, which they would spend at the company store. And that's not necessarily the problem. The problem was more the houses that the coal mine owned that the workers would pay rent on in those houses. And it's not having inheritable wealth. So after you worked at the mine for however long and you died, you couldn't pass that property on to your child. It would just go back to the company. And honestly, if you died and they didn't have anyone working at the mine in that house, y'all had to get the hell out because they got another family to put in there for your husband's replacement. Sharecropping was another way that people were not able to have inherited wealth. And the way that worked is you'd have a large landowner, and then he'd rent out like small plots of land, like 5-acre farms, to individuals, and then they'd farm the land, and then they'd share the crops with him, with sharecropping. But I mean, you could work those fields for generations, and your family would never have an opportunity to own that land. It would always belong to the landlord, unless, of course, maybe he fell into economic stress and he needed to sell some land for some quick money. But that was never going to be an option up to you. Sharecropping was very reminiscent of the feudal and serf relationship in Europe, where the kings would own the land and then make all the peasants work on it. Now, while I was looking up something else, I found a law that's still on the books. Removal of crop by tenant before rent and advances are satisfied. It shall be unlawful for any person renting the lands of another, either for a share of the crop or for money consideration, to remove therefore without the consent of the landlord any part of such crop until the rents and advances are satisfied. Every such offense shall be punishable with a Class 3 misdemeanor. You would have a lot of smaller farms on the land, maybe like, say, 5-acre farms, and then as technology changed and different farming techniques came into play, the farms would increase. So maybe, well, it would be common to have a 5-acre farm, and then it would be common later on to have a 20-acre farm, and now, you know, how they have these giant farms. So it would be common to have multiple farmhouses like this on a property, and the owner would just build a new house somewhere else, and these houses just fall into disrepair. This is the old Route 100. Now this road is unused. They built a new road going over this mountain that we're on. And so what this is isolation. So roads like this would isolate a lot of communities because the 18-wheelers weren't able to make it to them, and they couldn't, you know, stock the stores or anything else. So, you know, as time's passed, these old roads have gone out of use, and now we've got like a superhighway right over here where they've just blown up half the mountain and just a straight shot up, instead of this little windy road that would zigzag over the mountain. If you're living in a very rural area, you know, you're not going to have public transportation like buses or subways or something to take you to go find employment or anything else. You know, if you're living on the side of the mountain, unless you got a car or a vehicle to get you somewhere, you're just stuck on the side of a mountain. This is New Bern Elementary School. New Bern used to be the county seat of Pulaski County, but after the courthouse burned down, they ended up moving it. The population decline is another symptom of the hood in the woods, and an easy way to tell population decline is going to be empty schools. Schools that the town had once had a population of children that they would require, you know, usually in elementary school, like this one, but as time has passed and people move, children don't live in the same town that their parents live in. There's no need for schools like this, and they close down. So what we have here is the methadone clinic in Pulaski, Virginia. The Oxycontin came out in 1995. That changed everything. A lot of people got addicted to it. There was doctors were overprescribing it for reasons that it shouldn't have been prescribed. There was a lot of different factors involved in it. The long and short of it was a lot of people got physically hooked, you know, physical dependency, where they couldn't really come off the drugs without, you know, becoming violently ill. So Pulaski County is involved in a class action lawsuit against the makers of Oxycontin, alleging that they knew about the harmful properties of the drug, but yet didn't do anything to stop it, and in fact misled doctors and the public. But as a result of that, this really conservative county that had one liquor store in the whole county, they moved the liquor store out of this town to another town so that they could bring in a methadone clinic. One of the problems I have with Suboxone and methadone is because they've run the pills out of business so much, where like Vicodin and like the real low-grade pain pills used to be the gateway drug. Now kids are starting using like real hardcore drugs like Suboxone and methadone, and then heroin, fentanyl, to and that's turning into the gateway drug. So really the new gateway drug is also like the end of the line drug. And there's not being too much room in the middle. The first reason that they would put a methadone clinic here is because there's a very high percentage of people who was addicted to pills. And because of that, they were going to methadone clinics other places. In fact, the methadone clinic in Galax, Virginia, it's not hard to go there and see cars from Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and North Carolina in the parking lot. Now the same story goes here with this one. So it's almost like the town, yeah, they're helping their residents, but they've also kind of taken up the cause of legal drug dealing now. So now you've got the corporation making methadone, making Suboxone. They're now reaping the benefits of it. But unlike when it was Oxycontin and you'd have the addicts would be hurting themselves to go to the doctor to get pills, now you can just come here and say, hey, I have a drug problem, and they'll set you right up with all the drugs. So it's kind of making it easier for people to obtain, is spreading further. Because a lot of these people, when they get it, it's not like you have to come down here every day. They have a little level system, and after you reach the point where you have enough, they have the trust in you, you're allowed to take them home. You'll have a month's supply of methadone, or you'll have a month's supply of Suboxone. But then that turns into you selling it, or the people selling it around the community. And now they're the little drug dealer. They've got the drugs coming to them, and they can sell it and disperse it to other people in the community. So what happened with the drugs, because this is like ground zero for the opium epidemic. And after they made Oxycontin and everyone got strung out on it, the pill company trying to help everybody out, they make Opana. And Opana was something very similar to Oxycontin, except it had a gel center so that you couldn't snort it. So unfortunately, what happened with that is instead of slowing down, that kind of sped up all the drug users. And so then they started using needles and shooting up the Opana, which then just right away they started shooting up the special kind of Oxycontin that they made that you couldn't snort. So after they really pulled in all the pills going on, the methamphetamine starts coming into play. And it's just, as soon as they took away one drug, people started making the shake and bake meth. And the shake and bake meth, it was really only prevalent for maybe about 18 months to 2 years was when it was going on. And then all of a sudden, magically, there's all this ice or glass is the kind of what, is the name of this type of meth that's in the area now, and it's flooded the area. So now we're in a situation where now we've got rid of the pills, we've got everyone on Suboxone and methadone, and then poof, all of a sudden here comes this meth. We got these situations where so many children were born addicted to prescription pills, and now the buck's just been passed, and if the doctor gives you methadone while you're pregnant, that's perfectly fine to be taking that, regardless of whether, what effects that's going to have on the child, because it's better for the users to have a controlled dose regulated by a doctor instead of being on the streets and, snorting 3 pills on Tuesday and not doing nothing on Wednesday, and then railing another 3 pills on Thursday. It is more regulated, and I guess it's better for the child. And they're doing all of that because the social services system is being overwhelmed with all these children that don't have anywhere to go because of all the chronic drug abuse. The difference is between the methadone clinic and the Suboxone clinic is I think the Suboxone clinic is a lot more forgiving to you on failed drug tests, whereas the methadone clinic, you have a lot less options for the failed drug test. But one of the things is they really want to keep the people going to the methadone clinic or to the Suboxone clinic because they'd rather have them going there than being out on the street scoring. And so these parents will be going to the Suboxone clinic and they'll be getting drug tested and they'll be failing the drug test for meth. But they won't want to stop their treatment because they still need the parents to take care of the children because the DSS system is so overwhelmed that they can't hardly be accepting any more kids. So they're doing everything they can to keep the children with the parents. Now this is leading to some ridiculous child abuse cases, child neglect cases that are going on. And even in situations where the parents aren't being found legally guilty because they were taking the drugs by the doctor's prescription or by the doctor's recommendation, and following everything to a T because, these drugs are putting you to sleep and the child's getting hurt while you're asleep, and it's been ruled by the Supreme Court that parent was not legally responsible, but yet this situation wouldn't have occurred if, they weren't giving them the drugs. If, the DSS system was doing something more with the children of the drug users, and it's just a spiraling thing. Another symptom of being in the hood in the woods is the death rate. So we're here in front of the asylum. As a male my age, I'm most likely to die of a drug overdose, then I'm second most likely to die in a car crash, and then I'm third most likely to die of suicide, which, the demographics have shifted in the past couple years, and that all plays into, drug use, as well as, the unemployment and desperation that a lot of communities feel. That's lowered not just mine, but everyone else's life expectancy around here. And for the first time in history, in American history, people's life expectancy has decreased instead of increased, even though we have all these medical advances. So this one time I was living in Fairlawn, Virginia, and I had to work out of town because of the just the bad economic situation that was going on, and I was working in North Carolina, and my neighbors broke in my house and they stole all my stuff. So I come back from working out of town. I've been gone for like a month, and my house broken into, all my stuff's gone. People have been using it as a party pad, and I'm a little bit upset about that, but people play the mind games with you, and you're never really going to know who you can trust and who's being cool with you. And just pro tip, usually the one who's being cool with you is the one you shouldn't be trusting. So about 6 months later, I seen a guy outside, and he was wearing my shirt, and it was a white Corona shirt. And I ran up on him and I said, "Hey man, you better take that off before we get blood on it, and don't either of us want that shirt." So he took it off and then he gave it to me. But I was still pretty mad about that situation. So later on that night, I ran up on him, and I ain't gonna lie, I sucker punched him a little bit and I knocked him over. And he turns around and he hits me back. And I saw stars. And then the stars stopped moving, but I was still seeing stars, and I was really confused. And at that point I realized it's because he had knocked me down and I was laying on my back looking up at the sky. So when you're in that situation, I do what you're supposed to do, and I pull my knees up to my chest, and that's about the time he tried to hop on me, and I was able to catch him with my feet. And I see in his hand he's holding a pair of brass knuckles. Now brass knuckles, while not illegal to possess in Virginia, they are illegal to do about anything else with. You can't carry them, you can't brandish them, you can't conceal them, unless you're going to walk around with them on a necklace. You have to leave them at home. But he had the brass knuckles that had been stolen out my house, and he had hit me with my own brass knuckles, and damn near laid me out. But I'm proud to report to you about that time I got pretty upset, and he had him in his right hand, so I grabbed his right hand with my left hand, and while I had him kind of stuck on my feet, then I went to town with my right hand while he tried to defend with his left. And it didn't work out well for him. This is the problem with drugs in the community, because someone sees what he's happening to him because he had broken into my house. I beat him up. You know, that's plain and simple. You know, they can call the police. The police came and said, well, you broke in his house, you kind of deserve to get beat up. And that was the end of that situation. But then 6 months later, you got someone who has seen exactly what happens to you if you're trying to steal from me, and they trying to steal from me. You know, and they ended up in the exact same situation. And once again, they called the police after they did something to, you know, to earn getting beat up. And the police are like, well, you know, he didn't do anything wrong. So it just kind of blows my mind how you can do that to someone, and then someone who sees what's going to happen and what's going to be the repercussions still go ahead and commit that, you know, that act anyway. And you know, that's how bad drugs are. You know, they'll really just take the sense out of you. You know, and then sometimes if you live in the hood and the woods, you got to put the sense back into somebody. So another symptom of the hood and the woods is crime. Behind me, this restaurant used to be a Taco Bell. A girl named Tara Munzie used to work here. She's about 16 years old. A dude about twice her age picked her up after work, offering to do some drugs with her. She went with him, and he wanted to get a little something that she was not willing to give him. He shot her, he killed her, and he threw her down a ditch. A forensic files was made about this. It's season 14, episode 10, if anyone wants to check it out. This is the hotel on Baker Road, also known as the New River Regional Jail. It holds 1,200 people. If you get sentenced to less than 5 years in the state prison, you'll do your time here. It's also a county jail for 8 different counties. Like half the people who are in here for 2 things: shoplifting at Walmart and not paying child support. So my friend, he's in here, and we're gonna call him P. And P's a real nice guy, but he's just a horrible chronic drug addict. He's been chronic drug addict, you know, his whole life. His whole family's a bunch of drug addicts. And, you know, he's had a kid. He's never had a job. And it wasn't very long into him being a father before he gave up rights to his child. But the child support that accumulated before that happened, he's never paid off. He's never had a job to pay it off. You know, because he's just so far gone on the drugs. So P is in here again for, I think, umpteenth time, because they just keep, you know, sending him back to court for him not paying the child support. And it's not like I'm sticking up for him as a person, you know, but as a taxpayer, I think that's pretty ridiculous. Y'all, you know, we keep trying to squeeze blood out of a rock that's not going to give us any blood. And we're stuck footing the bill for him staying here. So it makes me question why, when 2 people who are equally drug addicted have a child, why will one of them be given welfare, Section 8 housing and Medicaid, and the other one who can't care for the child will get sent to jail? Another person in here, we're gonna call him Jay. And Jay's a drug addict too. Jay's the same story as P. He's been a drug addict for a real long time, and you know, he's been a drug addict on some pretty hard stuff. What he did to get in trouble was he stole $500 out of the safe in the gas station that he had been working at. So he was employed. And they fired him, and then that's when he went and stole the money. But, you know, he had been employed, he had been paying for, you know, his drugs out of his own pocket. Now, that was about 7 years ago. And he's probably spent about 5 of those years. When he finishes his sentence now, I think he's going to have spent 5.5 years in jail on this case. And he's going to have more probation coming to him. Now, he hasn't accumulated any new charges on any of this. It's just been probation violations for him failing drug tests, because, you know, they putting these drug addicts out in the community with, you know, limited support system. No one's going to offer them a job. You know, they pretty much turning into vagrants, you know, because of that, plus having to deal with, you know, the drug addiction. Because after a certain point, a lot of these people don't want to be drug addicts anymore. That's just who they are. And they wish they didn't work drug addicts anymore, but that's who they are. So he's in here now, so he's probably done about a year per $100 that he stole in this jail. Now all of us are going to be footing the bill for him and P to be staying up in here because of drug addiction. Not really them doing anything wrong, just their inability, to conduct their life correctly. Shout out to Jay, by the way, because not only was he the cameraman in 2 of my videos, he also got on the computer program for me and learned how to do that and pretty much taught me how to edit all these videos. So if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be making none of this. This is the Pulaski Motel, the old Red Rash Inn, as I like to call it. Another symptom of being in the hood in the woods is our section of the state receives more state money than what we pay in taxes to the state. In Southwest Virginia, and then in Eastern Virginia along the coast, where all the big money is, all the way from DC to the capital of Richmond, down to Newport News and Virginia Beach, where all the wealthy people are, they're paying more taxes and they're receiving less of that money than what they're paying in because it's coming to us. Asbestos is a big problem too. This building's chock full of asbestos. You could buy it, but you could never turn it into an apartment complex. You could never turn it into anything else until you had paid for this incredibly expensive asbestos cleanup to go on. Hood in the Woods is about knowing your local history, making sure that this isn't just like a creepy building that you see from the highway, but knowing that this is a historic landmark. This particular building was part of a school system here in Christiansburg, Virginia that was segregated. It was for black children. It was funded out of state. It wasn't just for Christiansburg. Kids came from the 15 different counties surrounding Montgomery County to come to this school. And it was a lot more than this. It was a chain of, I think, about 15 buildings, and only 2 of them are still standing. Because of the private funding it received, when it was involved in a Brown versus the Board of Education type lawsuit, they lost because the education here was superior to the schools around it. And even the judge in the case commented that he wished he could send his son to this school. Hood in the Woods is about talking about things that might be uncomfortable, but when we talk about it, telling both sides of the coin. So here we are in Fairlawn, Virginia, which is right across the river from Radford. It's in Pulaski County, and this is St. Albans. This is our local insane asylum. We're about talking about stuff that might not be too comfortable. Like how we used to take everyone that we didn't want in society and stick them into buildings like this. My dad was born in southern Indiana, right on the Kentucky border. The family is from around the Evansville area. And, he grew up without running water in his house. And he put himself through college. He worked at night, went to school during the day, helped his family out on top of it. But of course, that was in a different time too, when minimum wage was, enough that you could do something with. And as soon as he could, when he was 25, he signed up with the Department of Defense, and he went overseas, and he was stationed at Midway Island, which just began the list of exotic assignments that he went on. So I don't believe in ghosts. Now, I lived on Bottle Idling Station from 1993 until 2000. A lot more recently, I've looked up the history of that base, and it turns out that that base was built by the Nazis during World War II to use as a POW camp, and then after the U.S. liberated it, we used it as a POW camp to house the Nazis at. In fact, former Pope Benedict, when he was a Nazi, and when he got taken by the Allies at the end of the war, he went to the POW camp that he went to. That turned into the base that I grew up on. There was a building next to the school that housed the Russians, and the local legend was, after the Russians found out that they were going to go back to Russia after the war, Stalin had a policy of, if you got caught or taken POW, you obviously were not fighting hard enough, and he was such a strong believer in that policy, he killed his own son. So the Russians weren't particularly eager to go back to Russia, and they committed a mass suicide in front of the building that ended up being my school. Speaking of my school is a half-mile long building with a curved hallway going all the way down it, and it was just rooms coming off that hallway. I asked the teacher one time why it had that curved hallway, and they told me so you couldn't shoot all the way down it. So that's what happened when you have wartime construction. They wanted to protect their people, but from my understanding what the school was a hospital. I lived on that base for 7 years, never saw a ghost, never heard a ghost. I never heard of anyone seeing or hearing a ghost. It does not matter how many ghosts I see, they are not going to make me believe in them. When I lived in Colorado, we had a serial rapist in our town. So that ended up being a forensic files too. He ended up getting multiple life sentences in Colorado, and then he had killed someone in Pennsylvania. But since he got caught in Colorado, Colorado had first dibs on him. But if he ever gets out of Colorado, he's got a death penalty waiting for him in Pennsylvania. From the Woods is dedicated to the 3 standards that I have of creepy, historic, and abandoned. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please hit the like button. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. You need to do that, man. Don't watch my stuff for free. For more mountain music, check out Clovis Draper's YouTube channel. You can find me on Facebook as Hood in the Woods, and you can find me on Instagram as Abandoned in Appalachia. It's getting dark. Pulaski's scary after it gets dark.